Hello and welcome to eRacing's pre-season podcast. My name is Topher Smith and we will be looking through all things Formula E as we lead up to Season 2 of the All-Electric Championship. The season once again will kick off in Beijing, at which 20 drivers will be taking to the grid as we go to the Beijing Olympic Green Circuit. Here's Laurence Thorn to take us on a full run-through of all 20 drivers.
The grid for the second FIA Formula E season is largely similar to that from the first, with several teams retaining at least one driver from the first campaign and only 3 true rookies in the field. However, few would argue that the grid has got an upgrade in talent this year and looks even stronger than last season's star-studded lineup. Starting with the reigning champions Renault Edams, they retain the same lineup of Nicolas Prost and Sebastian Buemi, the Swiss driver who lost the championship last season by just 1 point. Between them, they took 4 wins last season and will both be aiming to lift the driver's crown this year. Reigning drivers champion Nelson Piquet Jr. remains at the next EV team. He partners Oliver Turvey, who made such a good impression on his debut Formula E weekend in London, taking 2 ninth places. Abt Scheffler Audi Sport will also retain their successful Season 1 lineup, with third place finisher Lucas de Grassi partnering Daniel Abt in the red, yellow and green machines. Dragon Racing also keep their successful lineup from Season 1, with Jerome D'Ambrosio, who won the Berlin E-Prix, and multiple podium finisher Loic Duval coming back to the American team. Andretti used 8 different drivers last season. They will keep Simona Di Silvestro on board, the Swiss female racer who competed for them in London. They also add the highly rated Robin Freins in their second car. The Dutchman won the Formula Renault 3.5 title in 2012 at his first attempt, but lacked the funds to go much further up the single-seater ladder. He'll hope that Formula E has his chance to prove himself once more. Venturi also keep one of their Season 1 drivers, the rapid Frenchman Stéphane Sarrazin, who won the second London race on track before losing it to a post-race penalty. They also add a massive name. 1997 F1 World Champion Jacques Villeneuve will make his debut for the team. Team Aguri also keep one of their drivers from last season, Buenos Aires E-Prix winner Antonio Felix da Costa. He'll drive alongside newcomer Nathaniel Berton, a GP2 race winner who will become the 7th French driver to compete in the series. DS Virgin Racing also keep a driver themselves, 2-time race winner Sam Bird, and they add the highly rated Jean-Eric Verne, who set 3 pole positions and took 2 podiums last season for Andretti. Mahindra keep the likeable Bruno Senna on board for a second year after he fought tooth and nail with Sebastian Buemi to keep 4th place on track in the season finale in London, while Nick Heidfeld moves over from rivals Venturi to partner Senna at the Indian team. And finally, Trulli, they keep the veteran Italian Vitantonio Liuzzi. His fellow Italian, the team Bossiano Trulli, has retired from racing, so the popular Mexican Salvador Duran moves over from Team Aguri to take his place.
And I'm happy to say that Laurence joins me now. So Laurence, a few of the top teams in there keeping the same driver lineup for this season. How important is that going to be for those teams in keeping with their continuity as we look forward to Season 2?
Yeah, I think the continuity of the drivers is a very important thing for all the teams, and I think it's a really good thing for the teams and also the championship. I mean, the teams that have kept 2 drivers who drove for them last year are probably the teams that had the best results to finish the season. You've got Renault Edams, they won the team's championship with Prost and Buemi. Next EV had Nelson Piquet Jr., who always got good results, and then when they put Oliver Turvey alongside him in London, he got good results too. So they've really gone with the lineup that gave them their most success last season. De Grassi and Daniel Abt at the Abt team had a good season too, and Dragon Racing, once Loic Duval came in mid-season, he finished on the podium a few times, and Jerome D'Ambrosio won a race as well as being on the podium too. So I think those 4 teams have all gone for sort of known quantities on the driver lineups, and then you get a team like Venturi with Sarrazin, who was very quick, Aguri with Da Costa, who won a race, Virgin with Sam Bird, who won 2 races. You know, these teams have all kept drivers who were successful for them last year and they know will deliver again this year, and I think that's a really positive thing that the teams have managed to hold on to them. And I think it also shows that Formula E is a championship where drivers want to get to and then stay. It's not a junior category like GP2 or Formula Renault 3.5 where a driver comes for a year or 2, moves around teams and then goes again. They're trying to build the series to be like Formula 1, a kind of pinnacle series where fans can really identify drivers with teams. They know that Lucas de Grassi is an Abt driver or Sebastian Buemi is an Edams driver. Same as in F1, you know, a lot of drivers are really well associated with the team they drive for. I think that's really important that Formula E has the same thing, and I think it's good for the series that they've got a lot of continuity this season with the drivers. especially with something like Fan Boost, where fan involvement is so important. I think if the fans know who's driving for what team, they're more likely to vote for the favourites rather than worrying about them sort of being chopped and changed at all times.
Well, also joining us on this podcast is Harry Benjamin. So, Harry, we have a few familiar faces returning to the Formula E grid this year, such as Sebastian Buemi, Nelson Piquet, Lucas Di Grassi. But we also have a number of rookies coming in, such as Robin Frijns with Andretti and Berton with Aguri. But the most high-profile signing for the season will undoubtedly be Jacques Villeneuve with the Venturi team. Harry, do you think that having a high-profile driver such as Villeneuve will help boost the impact that Formula E has on the fans?
Oh, absolutely. I think it already has, really. I mean, Jacques Villeneuve joining Formula E is another F1 name, well known to F1 fans, which has got such a broad base already, helping Formula E boost its fan base as well. And his nationality as well has really helped with the recent TV signings we've seen. I think RTL, the French TV network, have signed up again for the Formula E season. His name joining the Formula E group sort of shows the reputable nature of the series. You know, it's only in its second ever series. And at face value, he joins the name of Senna, Prost, Buemi, Di Grassi, all well-known names within, motorsport fans. And it shows at the moment. You know, he's fifth in the Fan Boost rankings currently on 7%, which is pretty good going.
And one thing that we possibly should discuss about Jacques Villeneuve is he's well into his 40s now. And he's up against the likes of Daniel Abt, who's only 21, 22, something like that. He's very young. Yeah. How do you think that Villeneuve would compete against a bunch of young guys when he is at the age that he's at now?
Well, it's tough to say, actually, because unlike in terms of Formula One, where age might be slightly against you in terms of when you really have to power the car, obviously the Formula E cars are heavy, but they're a lot easier to drive, according to the drivers. Venturi had a woeful season last year, I think it's fair to say. Nick Heidfeld and Stefan Sarazan did have a few races where, Venturi were at the front. So I think if that continues, they've got their own powertrain. I think Villeneuve can be up there and can fight with the likes of Daniel Abt, who I think he is the youngest driver on the grid, and against the oldest driver in Jacques Villeneuve. When Michael Schumacher came back to F1, he wasn't at the back every time. He was where Mercedes were, in the midfield. He wasn't under driving, and he managed to compete with the youngsters on the grid. And I think Jacques Villeneuve can do exactly the same. And I think he can probably win a race this year.
So, coming back to you, Laurence, Villeneuve is one of three absolute rookies in the field for Beijing, with Robin Frijns and Nathaniel Berton being the other two. How do you rate the chances of newcomers, and can you see any of them possibly springing a surprise this weekend?
Well, I'm delighted that Robin Frijns is getting his chance in Formula E. I mean, he is a fantastic driver. He basically, in the junior categories, he won pretty much everything he was entering, and mostly in the first season as well. He came into Formula Renault 3.5 in 2012. It was the strongest grid the series has ever had. It was an experienced grid, a lot of F1 reserve drivers, a lot of highly rated talents, and he won the championship. He then went to GP2, only did a bit of a season, still managed to win a race, but unfortunately for him, never had the funds to really go anywhere else in single-seaters, so I'm really happy he's got the chance in Formula E now to prove his talent. He's going to be very exciting to watch. He's very quick. He's got a very aggressive driving style, so I'm very much looking forward to seeing him on the grid. Berton is a guy who, when he came into GP2 in 2012, had a lot of potential, and he managed to win a race in 2013, but really the last 3 years he's been really battling with uncompetitive machinery, uncompetitive teams. It's been hard to really gauge him and get a real sense of his talent, but I think in Formula E he should do a good job. He's experienced, he knows what single-seaters can do, and Team Aguri, they had tested a lot of drivers, Pedro de la Rosa, Tom Dillman, Nicolas Lapierre, Stefano Coletti, so if they've picked Berton for the seat, he must have done a very good job in testing, and they must know what he's capable of. In terms of their chances, I think Frijns has a good chance of being successful, because in all his previous categories, he's been able to jump in a car and be quick straight away. Berton might take a bit more time, partly because Aguri, they're a team that was not probably as competitive as Andretti last season. But then again, he's got Da Costa alongside him, someone to learn from, who's, won a race in this category. So I think he could perhaps bring a surprise, but I think Frijns would be the biggest surprise. I've really got my eye on him. I think he could do a lot of great things in this championship. As for Villeneuve, it's hard to say, it depends, how motivated he is to race and all of that, but he sounds motivated, so I'm really looking forward to seeing him in action as well. But I think if you're looking for a surprise from a rookie, I think Frines will be the one that we have to watch out for. He could do something very special this weekend.
So, out of the 20 drivers we have preparing for Beijing at the moment, who do you see leading the title charge and getting an early advantage? Do you think PK maybe has a chance of retaining his crown?
For me, I think with all the continuity in the field that we've already discussed, I think the title fight will look quite similar this season to how it did last year. I think Buemi will be up there. I think Di Grassi will be up there. I think PK will be. It seems like Next DV are on the back foot a bit from testing, but if they get their car going quickly, then Nelson Piquet Jr. will definitely be in the fight. And the man who finished last season so strongly was Jerome D'Ambrosio, and I think he will have a really good chance too. You can never count him out. So I think those guys will all be fighting for the championship, and I do see it being quite similar to last year's title fight. Guys like Sam Bird or Jean-Eric Verne could get involved as well. With Verne, I'm not sure how committed he is to the championship, because he's been talking a lot about how he'd rather be back in Formula 1. And with Sam, he will definitely be a contender too, but I just get the feeling that we'll be looking at a top four of Di Grassi, Piquet, Buemi and D'Ambrosio. I think a surprise in the title fight could be Robin Frines. He has always stepped into a new championship and immediately been on the pace, immediately been fighting for championships and wins. But the fact that he's so inexperienced in these cars, and the fact that Andretti had such a poor run in pre-season testing with their powertrain and they had to switch back to the old one, we have to see how that will affect the team. But I do think he could maybe play a part. But in all honesty, I think it will be very similar top three to what we had last season.
Yes, I think it would be good if we see some new people maybe challenging for a title. Like, so we have Piquet, Buemi and Di Grassi possibly being title contenders again. But it's always good for a sport when you see new people coming up. Now, Harry, who do you see fighting at the top with the likes of Piquet and Buemi?
It's going to be a very tough fight, same as last year. You cannot rule out Virgin this year. They've got a good lineup with Citroen coming in as well, and Sam Bird and Jean-Eric Verne have to be one of the top two driver outfits there. So it's going to be very difficult to rule them out. Edams as well, Nico Prost, Sebastian Buemi. And actually, I would like to see how well the Mahindra outfit do. They had a poor season last year, an underwhelming season last year, I think it's fair to say. Bruno Senna got a good result in London in the final E-Prix. But with Senna, Heidfeld, Campos coming in to run their technical outfit, who powered, of course, Team China to Nelson Piquet's championship win last year, I think they might be one to watch as well.
I also wonder how well Heidfeld could have done had he not had all his problems throughout the season. The crash in Beijing, penalty in Punta del Este, penalty in Buenos Aires. You just wonder how well he could have done with a full, clean season.
Absolutely. He could have at least had one win under his belt at the first E3.
At least.
At least one, absolutely.
So, as already mentioned, the season will kick off in Beijing at the Beijing Olympic Green Circuit. But as for the rest of the calendar, it's largely unchanged, with the only real alterations coming with Monaco being dropped in favour of Paris, while Miami's also being dropped, with the replacement still to be announced. Now, Harry, there's a few cities that have been mentioned as being a replacement for Miami, the main contender being Mexico City. But do you think that Mexico will get it? And if not, would there be any potential replacements in line?
Now, I think Mexico getting the E-Prix would be very good, partly because we've got a Mexican driver on the grid, of course, in the form of Salvador Duran, and Mexico is a huge motorsport fan base. I've heard rumours it's supposed to be the shortened version of the F1 track, which we're going to in a couple of weeks. But I'm not convinced that we're going to go there, in all honesty. I think I've heard we've got rumours of Switzerland flying about, Lugano, Geneva. I think Montreal has also been mentioned. But I think the key idea is that Formula E is expanding into more countries, and I think landing a Mexico E-Prix would definitely bolster the calendar this year. It would only do good.
Yeah, I think Mexico City would definitely be a good addition to the calendar if that does come off as is rumoured. There's a great interest in motorsport in Mexico that seems to be growing at the moment. We've got Sergio Perez in F1, Esteban Gutierrez. We've got a Mexican Grand Prix coming back in F1 now for the first time in, I think, about 20 years or more. there's a lot of Mexican sponsors are interested, and you only have to look when Salvador Duran came into Formula E last season, the fan boost numbers he was getting, the amount of wins he had in fan boost. There's obviously a lot of interest in him and in the series in Mexico. So I think a race in Mexico City would be a good addition on the calendar, and logistically it makes sense because it's right between some American races, so I don't think they would go to Asia or Africa or Europe for that. It will be somewhere in the Americas, so I think Mexico City would definitely make sense. In terms of the circuit, I'm not too keen on a sort of shortened version of the Hermanos Rodriguez circuit. I would much prefer a sort of new street track. But of course, it's only rumoured at the moment, and FE often surprises us. So they could just, spring another race on us in, another American city or in Canada or somewhere else in the Americas. So I don't want to say too much about the circuit because we don't really know. But definitely Mexico would be my favourite to come onto the calendar, purely from the fan interest point of view. That would be very good.
And one last point, coming back to you, Harry. We've had the Monaco EP dropped from the calendar for this season, with Paris coming in as a replacement. Do you see Paris as being a good replacement for a track such as Monaco?
Oh, absolutely. I think I've heard rumblings that Monaco was going to be dropped anyway. It's supposed to be a sort of an alternate running track. And I think racing on Monaco streets, although the prestige, you get that with Formula E, there's too many Formula One comparisons for my liking, I think. Paris, on the other hand, I think it's going to be a great city to go to. It's really good for the city as well, who are actively trying to sort of lower their emissions and pollution outputs, which is the Formula E message, which Alejandro Agag, the CEO of Formula E, is trying to put forward. And I can't think of a better place to go than to Paris, racing around the streets there with the Eiffel Tower in the background, and with so many French drivers on the grid. We've got Jean-Marie Verne, Jacques Villeneuve, Stéphane Sarrazin, Nathaniel Berton. It's going to be one of the races of the year.
Well, for all you technical enthusiasts out there, we have Joe Jones joining us in the studio to talk about the gearboxes that Formula E teams will be using this year. Now, Joe, what we saw in testing was teams using different numbers of gears within the powertrain, with teams such as DS Virgin Racing using only a single gear in their car. Could you explain to us how a single-speed gearbox would differ from a 5-speed gearbox, and could any advantage be gained out of it?
Well, DS, as well as only using one gear, what makes their system unique is that they're almost certainly using two motors as well. It's an approach also used by Next EV, and if you read my article about their system, all of the points I mentioned there are applicable to DS too. But one of the main advantages of only having one gear is that because you don't need to change gears, it means that you have no time out of gear as such, because every time a driver makes a gear change and they pull the paddle for a fraction of a second, it means you're out of gear. So, though it may not sound like, why would that matter too much? But think about it, when you're braking, and with Formula E cars and any electric cars really, under braking you're recuperating that kinetic energy that you'd normally lose and putting it back into the battery. So if you're spending no time kind of just out of gear, it means that you're capturing a lot more of that energy under braking. So that's what one of the main advantages for using less gears, or in this case just one gear, has. Secondly, it also means all you need is a simple differential and not all the kind of clunky extra gobbins of having multiple gears which have to slot in and out of each other. Because a gearbox is a complex thing. Not only in crashes, but also with all that torque going back through the gearbox in the opposite way to normal during braking, when you're recuperating all that energy, that can put a lot of strain on the gearbox. So by simplifying all that, you have a lot less to go wrong. Also, gearboxes can cause slight inefficiencies, like wasting noises, vibrations, heat and sound. Lots of the sound actually we heard from the Formula E cars in season 1 was from the gearbox. And if you think all that sound is just energy not going through the wheels and pushing you forwards, but going to your ears, which doesn't help much. So if they just have a very well designed single gear differential, that could make small efficiency gains there as well. So I think in those kind of 2 or 3 points I just mentioned, those are the main things DS and Next TV for that matter are going to be hoping to get out of only using one gear.
And which do you see being ultimately faster over the course of a race? Teams with one gear or five?
Well, it's difficult to say. I mean, I think it's difficult for anyone to say, even the teams. Um, Now, I'm by no means a kind of e-motor nerd, so please don't take everything I say as 100% stonking fact. But I just have a feeling that one gear may be just a bit too radical, or at least for qualifying on certain tracks. Now, despite all those benefits to one gear that we'd just discussed, there are two major downsides to systems with one gear. So, for a motor to be able to just have one gear, it has to produce a lot of torque from a standstill. I mean, electric motors are good at this anyway, but especially if you've got no gearbox, the motor has to generate a massive amount of torque from the second it starts turning. Now, however, though more torquey from standstill, it's a common characteristic that this level of torque can actually quite quickly drop off at a higher speed with these kinds of motors. So I don't know if you've ever ridden in a Tesla, which, well, I convinced my dad to take a test drive once, so I got to sit in the back, and well, it is ludicrous. But what you notice is that the acceleration from a standstill is absolutely out of this world, but then as you pick up speed, it becomes a bit less wow, and this is something that could affect the teams. I mean, I think, in fact, I think it was a Next EV driver or maybe a DS driver saying that they don't think that high speed corners will be their forte, and this could be why. But remember all those advantages we just discussed about having fewer gears. So maybe Mahindra Venturi and the current McLaren system will have too many gears. So, long story short, I think maybe Scheifler's system in the Apt car, maybe that's going to be a good middle ground between not having too many gears and making all those losses, but then also not having this kind of tail off of performance as you get up to higher speeds. Also, less crucially though, these higher torque motors that we're discussing, they have to have a much larger diameter than those used in conjunction with a number of gears, like Mahindras, Venturis, etc. And when I was on the pit walk at the Donington test day, I actually was kind of sneakily looking over into the Next EV garage, and they were actually lifting the motor unit, out of the back of the car, and I was really shocked to see how big the motors are. So, I mean, I think DS will have looked at this and taken it into consideration, and I don't think it will affect performance or handling characteristics that much. But it's definitely something to take into consideration.
Well, that wraps up our e-racing pre-season podcast. Thank you to Laurence Thorn, Harry Benjamin and Joe Jones for joining me today. You can watch the Beijing E-Prix first practice at 8:15 a.m. local time, with qualifying starting at midday and the race at 4 p.m. Make sure you don't miss what's bound to be an electrifying first race of Season 2 of the Formula E Championship.